All right. Hello and welcome to the Repro Action Act and Learn webinar. Tonight's topic is how to talk about abortion and survive the holidays. We're so excited you're here. This couldn't be a more timely topic with the holidays coming right up. So first, I'm going to introduce our host. You are hearing myself, Erin Matson. I am co-founder and co-director of Repro Action, and I'll let my co-conspirator introduce herself.
Thanks, Erin. So I am Pamela Merritt, and I am co-founder and co-director of Repro Action, and I'm based in St. Louis.
And we are so excited you're here. So I'll pass it on to Pamela.
Thank you. So the agenda for this evening's webinar, we're going to introduce new folks to Repro Action, and then we're going to have a conversation about abortion stigma with Steph Herold, who is co-founder and managing director of the Sea Change program. After Steph's presentation, we're going to have a fun and very interactive panel discussion of likely holiday topic scenarios and offer some advice and some coping thoughts of how to handle those scenarios. And then we'll go into next steps, and we will have time at the end for a Q&A with Steph and with Erin and myself. The hashtag for live tweeting this evening's webinar is in Stigma. So we do encourage folks to live tweet and share your thoughts and kind of share what's going on the webinar.
Great. And just if you have questions that you want to share at any point in the presentation, feel free to chat those into the chat box. That's how we will be taking both questions and comments. So feel free to add those, especially as we get into the panel discussion. Perhaps you may have your own ideas of how you'd like to handle those situations creatively. So about Repro Action, who are we? So Repro Action is us. We're a new direct action group forming to increase access to abortion and advance reproductive justice. We are forming because there is a human rights crisis in the United States surrounding access to reproductive health care, and we believe deeply that it's time to get tough and turn that around. We are very proud of our left flank analysis. You can consider us left flank within the movement. One thing that we're quite proud of is a willingness to hold folks on all sides of the aisle accountable, whether they are considered allies or opposition. So anyone who stands in the way of increasing access to abortion, we are willing to pressure them. And we have a deep commitment to nonviolent direct action. We know that direct action is a paradigm shifter, that direct action gets the goods. We are deeply inspired by the work of many activists right now using direct action, including the Black Lives Matter movement, immigration activists, LGBTQ activists, and we're very excited to bring that tactical toolbox into the reproductive movement. So with that, I'll pass it back to Pamela.
Thanks so much, Erin. So let's talk about abortion stigma. Joining us this evening is Steph Herold, who is co-founder and managing director of the Sea Change program, and Steph is out of Brooklyn, New York. Steph is an award-winning activist and researcher with a background in abortion care, abortion funds, and reproductive health advocacy. Her writing has been featured in The Nation, RH Reality Check, Jezebel, and Our Bodies Ourselves. Steph is a recognized expert on abortion access, appearing in various media outlets, including the Melissa Harris Perry Show. Campus Progress named Steph one of the top 15 young feminists, and Time magazine profiled her abortion rights activism in January of 2013. She served on the board of directors of the New York Abortion Access Fund for 3 years and served on the Access Women's Health Justice Board of Directors for 1 year. Thank you so much for joining us, Steph.
Thanks, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for that great introduction and to ReproAction for inviting me on the webinar tonight. So Pamela and Erin asked me to talk a little bit about abortion stigma. And of course, every person who works in abortion in some way, whether it's in a clinic or in the policy work or in grassroots activist work, um, is an expert in what it feels like to be stigmatized. We all make very careful decisions about who we tell about our work or who we tell about what reproductive experiences we've had. We make calculations about whether to wear our Fund Abortion Now t-shirt to the grocery store, or whether we tell the person we're sitting next to on an airplane that we work in the reproductive health rights and justice movement. So tonight I'm going to give you a little bit of a framework for understanding what abortion stigma is, which we really believe can help us figure out what to do about it. So first I'll tell you a little bit about Sea Change. If you could go to the next slide, Erin, that'd be great. Thanks. So Sea Change is a new nonprofit organization that started in January of 2014. We have 7 people on our team, so we've grown even since we've taken this cute photo. And we have folks who are based both in Oakland and in Brooklyn. And we believe that everybody has a story and no one is immune to the effects of a society that routinely shuns truth-telling about everyday experiences, whether those experiences are abortion, miscarriage, gender-affirming treatment, or even breastfeeding. And against this backdrop, we work to bring diverse stories to light by inspiring dialogue and shifting beliefs in favor of a world where everyone can live with dignity throughout their sexual and reproductive lives. So we do this work in 3 main ways. First, we conduct original research and evaluation work that helps us understand what abortion stigma and reproductive stigma more broadly is, and what interventions actually work to transform it. We also partner with other organizations in the reproductive health rights and justice field to help build their own capacity to understand what stigma is, what culture change is, and how to intervene on stigma. And then we have our own stigma interventions. Our main intervention is called the Untold Stories Project, where we enlist community groups in book club discussions of a book that we published last year called Untold Stories, Life, Love, and Reproduction. And we measure if people end up disclosing their own reproductive experiences in those groups and if those disclosures actually help people change their attitudes. You can see our 1-year report on that project on our website, seachangeprogram.org. And in the next year, we'll actually be launching some exciting media advocacy work where we are starting a study to figure out how the news media covers abortion and what we can do to actually make that better. So with all that's going on related to abortion, a question we often get, often from advocates in the field, is why focus on abortion stigma? So at Sea Change, we see everything that's going on in the field is connected, and stigma is at the root of a lot of what we're seeing in the United States today. But it's unprecedented state-level restrictions on abortion, lack of federal support, especially federal funding for abortion access is related to stigma, losses in the Supreme Court in the past, hopefully not in the future, and circuit courts, clinic closures, rampant provider and patient harassment, inaccurate media representation of both providers and people who have abortions, the perception that most people think abortion is immoral, and this demoralized activists and advocates. We see all of this from the policy work to our individual level feelings as really being connected to stigma. So lots of people are working on abortion stigma, and it's important for us to understand exactly what it is that we're talking about. So together with our colleagues at IBIS Reproductive Health, we did a review of all the literature on abortion stigma and other stigmas, like stigma related to HIV/AIDS and mental illness, and came up with this definition. Abortion stigma is a shared understanding that abortion is morally wrong or socially unacceptable. And even though many of us don't agree with this statement, I think we can all acknowledge that this abortion is stigmatized throughout our culture, even if we don't want it to be. And we took this definition and applied it to what in public health is called the ecological model. You see these little circles in purple. And it shows how abortion stigma permeates every aspect of our culture. that we see stigma in the media when a person who's had an abortion is stereotyped on a TV show as being selfish or immoral, or perhaps abortion isn't even discussed as an option when someone is pregnant. We see it in policy, where politicians feel empowered to limit access to abortion and discriminate against abortion providers without any consequences, which I think is something Repro Action is trying to change. In institutional settings, we see it in hospitals, for example, where some hospitals have policies that prohibit clinicians from providing abortions, not because they're anti-abortion, but because they're afraid of protesters. We see it in communities where faith leaders make sermons about the immorality of abortion as people who've had abortions sit in their pews. And then we see it at the individual level, where someone who's had an abortion may feel guilty for not feeling guilty about their abortion. And it's important to note that all of these levels are operating together at the same time, right? And they're each composed of groups of people who can be targeted for change. So at Sea Change, we view stigma as the problem and broad culture change as the solution. And we emphasize this because we know that abortion is not just a medical issue or political issue, that abortion is a social and emotional experience that's embedded in a cultural context, and that without addressing culture, our work for justice and access can't be fully achieved. And we use this metaphor of the three-legged stool for what a complete movement for reproductive health, rights, and justice would look like. That it would have, it would focus on healthcare quality and access. It would focus on proactive policies, and it would also focus on culture. So now I'm going to show a short video that expands a little bit about how abortion patients and abortion providers experience stigma. And while you're watching this, I'd love for you to think about what impacts or manifestations of stigma you see in your community. And feel free to send those in the chat box as you're watching.
We're going to tell the story of how patients and abortion providers experience abortion stigma. We all know what it feels like to be stigmatized. We can feel invisible, silenced, ashamed, and even powerless. But what is at the root of those feelings and experiences? What is stigma? With an average of 1.3 million women deciding to have an abortion every year, and 1,700 abortion facilities, including thousands of people who work at those clinics, it means that there are a lot of us affected by abortion stigma a lot of the time. We are going to take a glimpse at how both a patient and a provider might experience abortion stigma. When a woman decides to have an abortion, she'll likely experience abortion stigma even before she arrives at the health center. Growing up, she may have heard negative opinions about abortion in her community, at her place of worship, or in the media. She may feel so much shame about needing an abortion or for even having sex that she keeps her decision a secret from people she loves. She may feel isolated and alone at a time when she might need a hand to hold or a hug from a friend. A woman may also experience stigma when trying to get an abortion. She may have to travel long distances because there isn't an abortion provider near where she lives. She may feel uncomfortable about asking someone to accompany her to the clinic or watch her kids out of fear of being judged. Some states even withhold coverage for abortion care for those who have Medicaid or private insurance, so she may have to work extra hours, borrow money, or sell her belongings to afford travel, housing, and the abortion itself. Many states have additional laws that reinforce the idea that abortion is morally wrong and socially unacceptable. When a woman arrives at the health center for her appointment, she might encounter anti-abortion protesters shouting at her. She may also face security measures like clinic escorts or bulletproof windows, which are meant to protect her, but might add to her feeling like an abortion is different from other health care. And once inside the clinic, she may have to go over incorrect, state-mandated information about abortion. It's also important to consider what might happen to a woman after her abortion. Just because the procedure is over doesn't necessarily mean the feelings of stigma will be gone. There are messages about abortion around us all the time, in movies, billboards, the news, conversations in public, or even conversations among family and friends. This means that the stigma she experiences can be easily reinforced while she's watching TV, driving down the highway, or at the dinner table. Abortion patients aren't the only ones who experience abortion stigma. People who work in abortion care also experience stigma. They may feel unsupported by family or friends and separate from their neighbors and community. This type of relationship damage can impact health, creating feelings of isolation and even workplace burnout. Like patients, they too encounter protesters. They may have to enter their workplace every day, hearing that their work is unwelcome in their community. Abortion clinic staff may feel that other medical providers see their work as illegitimate or unimportant. Abortion staff can sometimes feel as though their colleagues who don't work in abortion services don't understand what they go through day to day, and that colleagues may unintentionally add to their experience of stigma. Abortion providing staff are also impacted by laws restricting the services they provide, forcing them to jump through hoops just to be able to care for their patients. In many states, they're forced to share medically inaccurate information with their patients. And they often encounter messages about abortion in the media, where the work they do is portrayed as controversial and deviant. Again, this comes out in movies, TV shows, the news, and is pervasive in our culture. Both patients and providers experience abortion stigma in overlapping and distinct ways. It's helpful to think about abortion stigma as an ecosystem with many layered and intersecting components all happening at the same time. We are all stuck in a system together, and we need to untangle these components to figure out how to transform stigma, shame, and silence into visibility, openness, and empowerment. Together, we can make shift happen.
Ooh, that's a fun video to come up right after. Talk about stigma. So I'd love to hear from you guys as we keep going through. What impacts of stigma do you see in your community? Does it manifest as actual billboards, anti-abortion billboards that you see? Does it manifest as people you know just not talking about abortion with each other? Does it manifest as you not wanting to talk about your abortion work with other folks? Feel free to put it in the chat.
Steph, right now we don't have any questions, but again, you can just type it into the chat on the control panel of the GoToWebinar.
Great. So it's easy for us to feel disheartened after thinking about all the ways that stigma impacts us. We understand how powerful and hopeless that stigma can make us feel, but at Sea Change, we really believe that we have a lot to aspire to. And we use this acronym that you see at the bottom, VOICE, to offer some inspiration about what a world without stigma would look like. And we really emphasize the importance of knowing what that world looks like to help us figure out what kind of programs can get us there. So let's start with visibility. In a world without abortion stigma, people would know where to go to receive abortion services. They would see a variety of those experiences with abortion represented in the media too. Openness is about being able to talk about abortion when you want to, if you want to, without fear. This goes for patients, for people with a past abortion experience, clinicians, advocates, everybody. Currently, abortion is experienced as a marginalized service, separate from other forms of healthcare. So you go to a different clinic to get your abortion than you go to, if you have an ear infection. In a world without stigma, abortion would be integrated into all aspects of healthcare, and other forms of health and wellness care would be integrated into abortion care. Sometimes talking about abortion can often disconnect us from other people, right? We're afraid that just by mentioning the word abortion, we might push someone away. And that fear of disconnection can really rule our behaviors. In a world without stigma, people would not feel shamed by their experience around abortion. They would feel supported and feel connected to other people who share that experience. We know that stigma is a distinctly disempowering experience, and people feel targeted, they feel voiceless, they feel isolated and alone. In a world without stigma, we would feel empowered to speak up for the sexual and reproductive care that's necessary for us to determine our futures. And no matter your role in the abortion rights or reproductive health rights and justice field, you can be an ally to providers around you and people who've had abortions, and we're all part of the solution in figuring out how to reduce abortion stigma and create this kind of culture change that we're all looking for. So I wanted to give a thank you to Repro Action for talking about this and for helping people to brainstorm different ways to reduce abortion stigma, to my awesome team who works on this every day, and to all the folks who are working to address abortion stigma and create culture change.
Thank you so much, Steph. So again, thank you, Steph Herold with the Sea Change. And I'm sorry, I think I just talked right over you. To get in touch with Steph, you can reach Steph at seachangeprogram.org. And of course, check out their website. It's seachangeprogram.org.
Thanks, Pamela.
So before we begin our panel discussion about holiday scenarios and how to survive the holidays and talk about abortion, we have this wonderful explanation of abortion stigma and kind of what we're all working with, what the cultural clay we've got going on is, and I don't think there's very many people who haven't experienced abortion stigma in a broad sense in their work or certainly in personal circles. So one of the first things before we even dive into this discussion that we want to put out there is first and foremost to practice self-care. You know yourself, you kind of know where you're at, and we don't expect people to be martyrs and kind of dive into hyper hostile situations. So if you're in a social setting or in a family setting, and it's just not a healthy environment for you to speak up about these issues, then do what you need to do for you, and know that as activists, we all as individuals are doing work that helps to end stigma, and that might just not be the moment, the event in which you want to do that work. So having said that, let's dive right in, shall we? So we have Erin and Steph and myself, and we're going to tackle some of these questions and scenarios and kind of talk through different ways to approach these happenings. So the first one we have is that you're at a holiday gathering, be it the Thanksgiving holiday or any of the various holidays that fall in December, and your Aunt Ethel says she's pro-choice, but really doesn't like how women use abortion for birth control. I have heard this so many times. So tossing it out there, Erin or Steph, what's wrong with that, and what are some good responses for that?
Erin, you want to jump in first?
Oh, sure. I'll go first. And I just want to say at the outset, not only is my voice very low, apparently I have a cough bug that desperately wants to get out. So I apologize for that in advance. So first of all, it is incredibly common to hear, I'm pro-choice, but I don't like abortion. I mean, that's essentially what that's saying. And
right.
And, the thing is that abortion is ending a pregnancy, period. And it's really, presumptuous and frankly sexist to demand to know a reason why a woman or a person is seeking abortion in the first place. That it's really, frankly, it's not our business unless someone else lets us in. But the bottom line is if somebody doesn't want to be pregnant, then they don't want to be pregnant, and abortion should be available to them, and we shouldn't cast in otherwise. So I think, my response to Aunt Ethel would start with a smile. I often note that, when we talk in a friendly way, and when we acknowledge and let someone know that we've heard them first, that makes them more receptive to hearing. So I'd say, I hear your discomfort with abortion, and the reason that people might be seeking abortion. But, when you say that you're pro-choice, that means that you're saying that you support choice. And you're not saying that you're pro-choice with reasons. or you're not saying you're pro my reasons.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Steph, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, this is a really interesting point that I've heard a lot, actually from some advocates in our field too. So I think it's a common phrase. And I think what people who work in clinics will tell you is that abortion is actually the ultimate form of birth control, and the alternative for someone having an abortion is, giving birth when they don't want to parent. So I think I would kind of echo Erin and kind of listen to Aunt Ethel with a smile and with empathy, and just say, would you prefer that somebody give birth when they don't have the resources to have a kid? And kind of see how that lands with her. Or alternatively, to ask her, tell me more, where does that belief come from? What led you to think that? Was there somebody in your life who used abortion in that way, and did that really not sit well with you? To kind of really investigate where that comes from. So maybe that she just, has had a bad experience and needs somebody to share, maybe that was hard for her, but that's not how it is for most women, it turns out.
Good advice. Great stuff. I actually have a question from one of our attendees. So I'm going to read this one off from Jay. One example that Jay had a direct experience with was when he wore a "We Fund Abortion" shirt at a show in a theater with a well-known liberal pagan reputation. A woman there told him, "Your shirt is highly questionable," and she gave him told the shirt that said "We Fund Abortion" said the shirt is highly questionable, and gave him a dirty look later on before he left. Never had that situation before. But is that an example of abortion stigma, albeit an indirect one? How should I deal with that kind of reaction in the future? My goodness. So I'm going to take a first stab at that one, Jay. So this is, coming from my Southern kind of background, that usually I wear all kinds of T-shirts that often bring up questionable, like people saying it's questionable or kind of dirty looks. And so that actually has happened to me before, even in what I would consider progressive or liberal spaces. And so I always like to be super, super sweet about it, but in a slightly sarcastic way. Might not be the most helpful thing, but in that scenario, I typically would say, I'm really sorry you feel that way, and but I hope you have a great day, and kind of not acknowledge that it's questionable, but not, she's not going to get a debate out of me, but I'm proud to wear that T-shirt, and in that situation, I would say she's probably not asking for a dialogue. She's trying to be judgy, and so my pushback is, I'm really sorry that you feel that way, and just wish them well and kind of move on. And then with the dirty looks, I almost always answer dirty looks with a big smile, and I find that it drives people a little bit batty, but it's also I firmly believe, and I know at ReproAction we believe that abortion is a good and powerful thing, and so I'm not ashamed, and I think when we reflect that back, it kind of puts people off their kilter, and kind of puts it back on them. So, Erin or Steph, do you have anything to add?
I just want to say, Jay, you rock for wearing abortion funding shirt out to a play. And, I have to give my credit where credit is due. Michelle Kinsey Bruns, who is a clinic escort on Twitter, for those of you who are active on Twitter in the abortion space, she has this phrase that she calls going pro-choice in the wild, to refer to wearing, your clinic escorting gear or your abortion gear just out to the grocery store, or, out of context, in other words. And this story that you shared makes me smile, because I had taken to wearing, once I thought of pro-choice in the wild as a concept, I started doing it as much as I could. as a political act, that, you know, I want to normalize abortion. I want to hold my head up high. So when I had a newborn daughter, I was often the person you would see pushing a stroller with my Trust Women shirt on. And I have had people come up and make comments and give me dirty looks. And but I've also, I have to say, I had worn a Pledge a Picket shirt with that was made by Dr. Leroy Carhart, and it says in the back, kindness, courtesy, justice, love, respect. And a woman at the gym in the locker room came up to me and read the back of it and said, "That's beautiful. Everyone should be wearing that shirt." And I turned around and it said, "Trust me," and I just smiled at her and said,
Oops, sorry for the sirens, if anyone can hear that. I agree with you both, and just to co-sign what you said, Pamela, about a big smile and being really friendly. I think people expect those of us who wear abortion t-shirts on the regular to be kind of angry and standoffish, and you know, sometimes we are, and rightfully so. But I think when you show people kindness and when you smile, people are totally taken aback. I think that can usually open up a conversation instead of shut it down. So it sounds like you had the right reaction.
Very true. Very true. So just to go down our list a little bit, so let's say like your cousin Vernon says that abortion is an awful thing, but it should be safe, legal, and rare. And I think that's picking up on some of the things that we've heard, even some folks who might identify themselves as pro-choice say. So what's wrong with safe, legal, and rare, Erin?
"Oh my goodness, thank you for asking me, because I saw that. I mean, I've just been staring at the screen and dying to answer it." So, so cousin Vernon, and so actually even Hillary Clinton. When we say that abortion needs to be rare, what we're doing is we're saying that there's something wrong with abortion. There are statistically 1 in 3 women in this country will have an abortion at some point when she is of reproductive age. So abortion, in fact, it's not rare at all. And when we say that it should be, we're implying that these people, these women, are doing something wrong. That 1 in 3 women are doing something wrong, and that's just insulting to them.
Absolutely. Steph, did you have anything to add?
Yes, I have 1,000 things to say about this. And shout out to my friend and colleague Tracy Weitz, who wrote the most amazing academic paper about this, called Rethinking, the Mantra that Abortion Should Be Safe, Legal, and Rare. So I'll give like a 10-second synopsis of her paper, which is, first, it's saying that you want abortion to be rare, right? It implies that there's something wrong with abortion, like Erin was saying. There's something wrong with people who have abortions, over 1 million people a year who have them, and there's something wrong with the people who provide abortion care, right? And wanting to make abortion rare suggests that training people to provide abortions is unnecessary, which we know is totally incorrect, right? When in reality, we need more abortion providers to increase access to safe abortion care. And it also implies that there's this magical number of abortions that will actually make the abortion conflict go away. We know that's not true either. We know that another consequence of the rare framework is that it legitimizes the need for abortion restrictions, which have awful consequences for people who need abortions and providers. So I think that saying we want abortion to be rare doesn't achieve the underlying goal of reducing the social conflict over abortion, and actually has real consequences for women's health and well-being, including reducing access to care, increasing stigma, justifying restrictions, and establishing this unattainable goal of a magic number of abortions that society will deem okay. So I would say we don't want abortion to be rare. We actually want there to be as many abortions as there need to be.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So we have another question from the attendees. Danielle has a good one and a tough one. So Danielle says that she had a boss once who said abortion is an offshoot of our pro-death culture in America, which was so out of left field, Danielle couldn't think of how to respond. What would you guys say, especially in a boss scenario? So I'll take a first stab at that. In the boss scenario, kind of changes everything. And so I've worked for the full range of bosses, and I tend to err on the side of not engaging in debate unless I have a really strong relationship with that boss. So depending on how what the personal relationship is. If this is somebody who's like traditional boss and you're a traditional employee, then let it slide and just chalk it up to them not being professional. Because they've opened up an avenue of conversation and they have an employer-employee relationship with you, which makes it hard for you to be honest about your opinion without being judged by them. If you do have some sort of relationship with them, then there's a couple of different things that you can do with that, where you can talk about abortion is healthcare, and America has a problem with violence, but abortion is healthcare, and those two very different things. So if we want to talk about the death penalty and gun violence, then I'm more than happy to have that conversation. But I would say 9 times out of 10, that's not a good one to dive into with your boss. So, I personally think that when you get into your paycheck and your employer, it can be tough. If it's an ongoing problem, then you might want to see if there's ways to address it so that you can say, I don't necessarily share the same political views that you do, and it makes me uncomfortable when you bring up things because I'm not in a position to respond, or maybe even bring it up to HR. But I don't think you want to put yourself into a position once they've made it clear where they feel where they're going to be judging you. Erin, Steph, anything you want to add?
I think everything you've said, Pamela, is spot on. This is not a battle I would fight. I think we all know that sometimes even with family members, there's the employer relationship. You definitely don't want to harm your economic well-being, but there's family members too where it's just, or other people where it's just not safe to have the conversation. Generally, one thing that I always try to make sure to do is to, close off conversations swiftly, to acknowledge, say something along the lines of, you and I have a profound disagreement, and I am proud to hold the views I do. So that way you're not apologizing for how you feel. You're acknowledging that you have a profound disagreement, and you're closing conversation off. Just move on.
That's good. I'm going to write that one down myself. That's awesome. Steph, did you have anything to add?
No, I think, I feel like I should take advice from you guys on this, so that was great.
I'm taking notes, seriously. Thank you so much for that question. So let's go on down, because this is one that I actually hear often as well. Someone says that those sidewalk counselors outside of clinics are just trying to help. They're really nice people who are just trying to help. And let's just assume this is somebody who knows that you might escort at a clinic, or even knows your political views. So Steph, what's a good way to handle that kind of conversation stopper?
Yeah, I think, my gut reaction to all of these is to say something snarky, but it turns out that's actually not the best way to win someone over in a conversation. So I would say, first, to know that even though it might feel really good to say something snarky back to somebody, that's actually usually not the best way to get them to engage. And also that people don't respond, that logic doesn't usually change people's opinions or change their minds, or telling someone that they're wrong usually doesn't help open them up to a conversation, right? So I would start by saying something like, actually, I've walked into a clinic before, and those protesters made me, or those counselors made me feel really, really bad about myself. And I didn't think that they were trying to help me at all. I actually felt like they were shaming me. Or say, my friend had, went into a clinic and encountered those protesters or those counselors. You'll see my bias coming out. And she actually felt really, really sad and shocked and bad about herself because of them. And it turns out that they, even though, it might seem like they're trying to help her, she actually felt worse as a result. So getting people to see kind of the emotional consequences instead of just saying, actually, those people are wrong and terrible, and not doing women any good, which is still the case, but may not get them to actually rethink that comment.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Erin?
Depending on my relationship with the person, I might note that I think it's one of the profound tragedies in this country that there are so many people who have who say they care deeply about babies and children and devote hours of their time, sometimes every week, standing outside of clinics, when if they use that same energy to stand outside legislators' offices and ensure that babies have access to food and health care, if they redirected that energy toward the well-being of babies who need help here in this country, that it's just sad that that there's so much misdirected energy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great suggestions. Another question from our attendees. Y'all are awesome. From Kim. What do you do when people say they are pro-choice but don't like to say the word abortion in public spaces? Steph?
You'll see my strategy, but I would ask them to talk more about that. What is it about the word? What when they say public spaces, what do they mean? Does that mean with their family and friends? Does that mean at work? And I would actually, instead of pressuring them to do that, I would say, that's pretty normal for a lot of people because abortion is so stigmatized. And sometimes I do that too, no matter, even if I work on abortion from 9 to 6 every day. And I would then explain why it really matters to talk about abortion and how they can be they can be brave. There are people who actually walk through throngs of protesters every day to provide abortion, and they say the word abortion aloud. So if they can do it, then surely we can do it too.
Awesome. Erin, anything to add to that?
Steph is one of the top experts in this country on that topic. All I have is applause for her. Nothing to add.
Ditto. Good stuff. So this one, I'm willing to guess everybody has heard. I'm not against abortion. I just don't think I should have to pay for it. Erin?
So the deal is that that we do not pick and choose what we pay for in insurance plans. For example, we don't say that we want to make sure that we don't cover cancer treatments, or that we don't cover even Viagra, or so that's just simply not the way that health coverage works. And abortion is part of healthcare. And so when we're saying that, that abortion is something that one person should have the ability to opt out of paying for, what you're saying is not, what you're not doing is isolating the abortion procedure. In fact, what you're doing is you're saying that you are against people who need health care. And so I think that, the bottom line is that it's not fair for people to have one set of constitutional rights if they have enough money to pay for an abortion procedure out of pocket, which, by the way, is unrealistic for a huge proportion of people. The cost of a procedure often results in people having to forego basics like groceries. You hear stories of people trying to sell their cars, desperate to get the health care they need. And particularly when as you get further along in a pregnancy, an abortion can just be prohibitively expensive. So it's really, it's a tragic situation that that often people are pushed into desperate economic circumstances to pay for the abortions that they want. And it seems, frankly, un-American to give people of means a separate set of constitutional rights than everyone else.
Here, 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 and that's certainly come up a lot in my personal experience, and I tend to depending on the person and the situation, I have two responses that I will give when somebody says that. So the first response is to very upbeat and with a smile say, I could not disagree more. I think we should pay for abortion, and I think it's a shame that we don't pay for abortion. And abortion is health care, and then I usually launch into my, there's a slippery slope that most folks don't want to go down when we start picking apart which healthcare procedures we want to pay for and which ones we don't want to pay for. And that's why health insurance doesn't work that way, and healthcare shouldn't work that way. So there's a whole lot of stuff that I don't personally necessarily think makes a lot of sense, and more importantly, there's a whole lot of healthcare procedures that lots of people will never participate in, and I hope that a lot of healthcare procedures folks won't have to participate in, like open heart surgery or something like that. But it all gets put into a pod, and we all end up a better community and society because we are healthier. So, I don't think it's a good idea to open up that slippery slope. So, abortion is healthcare, and I think we should pay for it. And then the other side of that coin is that there are some folks who really are just, they're being snippy about it, and I'll go ahead and dive into the long list of things that I have to pay for that go against my personal belief system, that's not the way our system of government works. But I do think one of the things we don't want to do is we don't want to say, well, you don't, because as Erin so wonderfully went down and broke down, it's not good that we don't pay for abortion through Medicaid and in a lot of states, and through a lot of health care. Depending on which state you're in, health insurance is barred, and there's no federal funding for abortion. That's not a good thing, and we don't want to kind of double down on that as the defense mechanism, saying, well, you don't, because we want to start breaking down the notion that that's acceptable. The implications and impact on people's lives is really quite horrible. Steph, did you have anything you want to add?
No, co-sign everything you guys said. When statements like this come up, I usually ignore them and pivot to some completely different statement, which is just like, I think it's really unfair that people who are struggling to make ends meet have inferior health care than people with more money, like abortion care. I think it's really unfair that the government withholds coverage of abortion care from people on Medicaid. Did you know that abortion is the only procedure that Medicaid doesn't cover? And try to flip the conversation, so instead of responding to them, they're responding to my point instead.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff, good stuff. So we have time, I think, for a couple of more before we are going to open it up for questions, and I just want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to ask Steph any questions specific to her presentation as well. So let's see, what's another one? So things that we can anticipate probably coming up because they've been in the news, and if folks' family are anything like my family, if it's been in the news, it's going to come up, particularly after we've been in each other's company for more than 4 hours. So someone brings up the Planned Parenthood hearings and says that they think they're justified because of the content of the videos. What's a good way to respond to that? And let's just assume that the person bringing it up is being sincere. They're not being like snarkily saying, I heard those videos are horrible. Erin?
So those videos are horrible because they're purposefully distorted, and the producers of those videos lied to produce them. They likely broke several laws and will be found to have broken several laws to produce them. And the bottom line is the people who made them are terrorists. Troy Newman is on the board of directors of the Center for Medical Progress, the group that created those videos. Troy Newman has said that the murder of abortion providers is justifiable homicide, and he was recently barred from entering Australia because he is a known terrorist. So the bottom line is these videos should have zero credibility. There is independent fact checkers went through them, and there's clearly many gaps in conversations, highly edited, deceptively, and misleading. So the bottom line is, they purposefully, the people who produce these videos are purposefully trying to make abortion providers look bad. They want to demonize and shame abortion. Their goal is to edit women and people who have abortions out of the discussion entirely. And we just really, honestly, they shouldn't be given the time of day.
Hear, hear. Steph, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would actually take a completely different approach.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think I would say, the people who made those videos exposed a truth about abortion, which is sometimes it's uncomfortable for us to talk about. The details of a medical procedure, and like any medical procedure, there are things about abortion that can be uncomfortable for people. And I would also, I would acknowledge that up front. I think that really disarms people. They're kind of expecting you to go on this big a defense. And I think if you say, there are some things about abortion that are uncomfortable for people, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that we should legislate that right away, but it does mean that we should be able to talk about it with each other. And I would also say something like, I think the people who made those videos actually caught Planned Parenthood doing something right, which is empowering patients to donate their fetal tissue if they want to. And even though some of the conversations in those videos may seem kind of garish to people, that's just part of the way that physicians talk to each other. And it's really, really sad that the anti-abortion movement is taking advantage of the fact that there are things about abortion that make us uncomfortable, to try to take away that right for people. Just because it's, this conversation can be uncomfortable doesn't mean that we should make it more difficult for people to access abortion. It means we should become more comfortable talking about difficult things.
Good stuff. Interesting. So two different perspectives, and I can actually see both applying depending on the situation. So good stuff. So let's dive into something in keeping with our intersectional approach. So let's say you're hanging out and somebody's discussing House Speaker Paul Ryan's new leadership role, and they point out the fact that he's made comments about how he is going to demand family time and respect for his family time. They think it's great that he puts his family first. So what's a good response to that would be kind of an informed response? Obviously, somebody's puppy has a response to that. I'm so glad it's not my dog barking this time. So, Erin, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure. And I think I'd answer that two ways. First, I do think it's important that there is a conservative man saying that he wants to spend time with his family. I think that we need everyone to be doing caregiving work, and that it's really great that this is happening, not just with a woman. If a woman became Speaker of the House, this would have been a question that would have been immediately lobbed at her. So I think it's good to be having these discussions. Of course, the brutal thing about Speaker Ryan is that he consistently works against family-friendly policies. And so it's one thing to have this conversation. And it's simply a tragedy that so many people in this country do not get an opportunity to spend adequate family time, that many workers don't even have paid sick days, for crying out loud, which is a public health crisis. And also just it's completely undignified, and our country deserves better. We don't have paid leave, parental leave. We are, the shame of the industrial world. And so, when Speaker Ryan, he's not exactly a champion for families. In fact, he needs to be held accountable. And I hope that his new spotlight on him as a family man will force some deep reflection, or more realistically, some accountability from activists on the outside.
Did we just lose you, Erin?
Did you lose me? Am I here?
Steph, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Erin, are you still there?
You can't hear me anymore?
We lost Erin. So Steph, did you have anything to add to the Speaker Ryan family-friendly thing?
Oh, I think Erin was right on, and I think I would use that to start a conversation about why paid family leave and
here gather and having this awesome discussion and having this awesome gathering, and I think we all value family and need to put family first, and we need to support policies that help us do that. So we're coming up on just a few minutes. I want to make sure if people want to add questions, go ahead and drop them into the GoToWebinar control panel. And so kick it over to Erin for information about how to plug into our campaigns.
Yeah, so super briefly, and sorry that my audio dropped for a moment there. I'm glad to be back. Thanks to everyone for your comments and the spirited discussion. I've had a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot, and I hope that you all feel the same. I want to make sure that you get plugged into Repro Action in our campaign work. Please, if you have not done so already, sign up for alerts at reproaction.org. And we invite you to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as Repro Action. And then I also want to encourage you to save the date for our next Act and Learn webinar. We'll be hosting it on Tuesday, December 8th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic is to be announced, but feedback is actually very welcome. If there's a webinar that you'd love to see us do, feel free to type that in the chat box. We have a lot of options on the table. We could talk about clinic shutdown laws and really dig into what's happening in the states, as well as touch on what's happening at the Supreme Court. There's been additionally another possible topic that we could do next month if people are interested and it would be helpful, is focusing on the Each Woman Act, and specifically also which aims to break down insurance discrimination against abortion, really diving in deep and doing an explainer on what is the Hyde Amendment, how does this stuff all work, or any other ideas that you have. So, we love feedback, but we hope that you'll save the date and plan to attend with us next month.
Great. So we just have maybe a couple of minutes. We have one question that I'll toss out to Steph, where Ariella has asked what kind of research that you think is most needed in this area of abortion stigma.
Oh, great question. So the field of abortion stigma research is pretty nascent. When you think about other types of stigma, especially health-related, like mental illness or HIV stigma, those fields have been researching those topics for the last 20, 30, in the case of mental illness, really since the 50s. And the abortion stigma research is maybe 10 years old. It kind of started a little bit in the 80s and then really started booming in in 2009 with the publication of a first paper from some folks at IPAS, and we're really beginning to understand what the individual level of experiencing abortion stigma is like for people who have abortions and for providers. But we really don't have a lot of research into how the media perpetuates abortion stigma. We kind of know it intuitively, but we don't have a lot of evidence. We don't know about how institutions like hospitals or insurance providers or even schools, colleges may perpetuate stigma. So we're really still in a learning phase of how stigma is perpetuated. And then I think that the natural next step after that is to figure out what interventions work at all of those levels to make sure that we actually change stigma. That's where the field is going, I hope.
Awesome. Great question and great answer, Steph. Steph, thank you so much for participating in this webinar. It's been a lot of fun. We really appreciate your insight and your expertise.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and enjoy the rest of your evening.